Now listen, friends. In Israel, as in the entire ancient world, there were people who worked for other people on the principle of servitude. They were slaves in some sense, though not necessarily in the brutal and degraded way that we usually think of slavery. In America, we have a certain conception of slavery that's shaped by our history. But if you think that Israelite slavery was really analogous to slavery in the South in the 17th and 18th and 19th centuries, you're mixing it up altogether. It wasn't the same thing at all. And let me say something else about this. Some people think, and you'll actually hear people say this, that the Bible is responsible for slavery. That if it wasn't for the Bible, there wouldn't be slavery in the world. Friends, that is about the most ignorant thing that a person can say or write. If that were the case, then cultures that had never been touched by the Bible, they should have no slavery, right? Cultures that have never been touched by the Bible, they should just live in peace and harmony and love for one another because they don't have that icky old Bible leading them astray. Friends, is that the case? Of course not. Slavery has been a universal among human experience throughout history. No. The question for the historian and for the honest observer is not, why do cultures take slaves? The answer is, why do they set them free? And the reason why slaves are set free is because of biblical culture. That's not the reason why they're taken. And basically, in the Hebrew world, there were 4 basic ways that a Hebrew might become a slave to another Hebrew. I'll just give you the first and the most important, the broadest one, the one that covered most of the bases. Most Hebrew slaves became slaves because in extreme poverty, they sold their liberty. There were no bankruptcy courts in ancient Israel. When you had debts you couldn't pay, you had to sell yourself to servitude to somebody else to pay off the debt. It was a more formalized and, of course, a much more devoted kind of way of the old picture of having to wash the dishes in the restaurant because you couldn't pay the bill. Well, you can't pay the bill, so you can be my servant. You can do this servant until your debt is paid, or in the strict regulations of slavery in the Hebrew world, you were a slave for a period of 6 or 7 years. It's a little bit unclear because it says you shall serve for 6 years, and in the 7th year you should be set free. What people debate about was at the beginning of the 7th year or the end of the 7th year. We're not exactly sure. But after a period of 6 or 7 years, the slave was to be set free. The servitude was not to be forever. The ideas of man-stealing, the ideas of lifelong servitude, those concepts that many people have of slavery in our day, they simply do not apply to the practice of slavery in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, normally slavery was chosen or mutually agreed upon. It was of limited duration, and it was highly regulated.